The Red Sea Crossing. Egypt is steeped with a grand history. Various languages to trade for the much-needed food. The famine was all over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. As we exit the hallway through the area in the rear, we see over on one side a series of deep structures where grain was stored underground during the 7 years of plenty. Then over the next 7 years, it was sold to the Egyptians and visitors from other countries. A system of vertical underground silos created a cooler environment for the grain to be stored. This was the design of the genius, Joseph. When grain was removed from storage, the oldest grain was carried up by way of this long descending stairway. The grain silos were interconnected via tunnels, which allowed the grain to flow down to a central exit point located at the bottom of this stairway. A record of this event of removing the grain can be seen on hieroglyphics such as this at Thebes, showing the sacks of grain being carried up the stairs from the granaries. As a way to honor the Lord of Heaven, Joseph built this first pyramid in Egypt at Saqqara to show his thankfulness to the Lord for honoring him and saving the Egyptian people from famine. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. Centuries later, many other great pyramids were built in Egypt, following the lead of Joseph or Imhotep. 2.3 million large blocks of stone, weighing 2 to 3 tons each, were used in the largest pyramid, causing some to wonder how they could have been constructed using ancient technology. It has been a mystery for centuries. Ron Wyatt conducted a great deal of research on the subject to help shed light on this puzzle. He read the account of Herodotus, who wrote, "The stones intended for use in constructing the pyramids were lifted by means of a short wooden scaffold. Lifting devices were provided for each step. Mr. Wyatt noticed lift devices in hieroglyphics. These lift devices would have been placed on each side of stones that were to be raised. Large wooden levers were found in King Tut's tomb that were used in the machines. A series of these levers were placed alongside the blocks to be raised and would operate in unison. A large stone was loaded onto the machine, then the levers on each side were pulled downward by ropes tied to turning winches, thus raising the stone block as needed. When the block was raised to the proper height, it was rolled onto the next level and then raised again. A series of lift machines would have been utilized. Mr. Wyatt demonstrated this type of lift machine to Mr. Nassif Hassan, head of the Egyptian Antiquities Organization of Cairo. The demonstration was filmed by Japanese Nippon Television and later aired in Japan. This lift machine appears to be a simple solution to the mystery of constructing the pyramids. When Moses was a baby, his adoptive Egyptian mother was Hatshepsut, and Moses' name was Senmut. The serpent on his forehead signifies his title of prince. As an adult, Moses' Egyptian name was Tutmosis II. A side profile of Moses demonstrates his distinctive Hebrew-shaped nose. After Moses killed the Egyptian, he fled from Egypt and its territories for fear of the current Pharaoh. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. Moses was married and then had a son, whose name described their foreign home. He called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." This tells us Moses was not in any area controlled by the Egyptians. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert, and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. The Lord told Moses to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain outside of Egypt. After 10 plagues had struck Pharaoh and the Egyptians, he finally agreed to let Moses take the children of Israel from Egypt. Based upon the research he conducted, Ron Wyatt believed that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Amenhotep III. Here we see Amenhotep receiving the Ankh as a type of power and new life being infused into his body. Mr. Wyatt speculated that Amenhotep's eldest son was Tutankhamun, and that he was killed by the destroying angel in the 10th plague. Tut would have been the crown prince and co-ruler with his father at that time, in the late 18th dynasty in 1446 BC. Surprisingly, in the Biblical Archaeology Review, it stated that the majority of archaeologists do not believe in the Exodus from Egypt. Tradition has told us that the Exodus from Egypt led the children of Israel to the Sinai Peninsula, but no evidence has been found of their having been in that location for 40 years. Also, tradition has said that the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea in an area that does not match the biblical account. Could the Bitter Lakes be the Red Sea spoken of in the Bible? Could thousands of soldiers all drown in relatively shallow water? The traditional Mount Sinai, Jebel Musa, is located in the southern mountainous area of the Sinai Peninsula. This mountain was chosen by Helena, the mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine, in the 4th century. It was not chosen by any archaeological evidence at the site, but was based upon the dreams of Constantine, and subsequently chosen by Helena as Mount Sinai. Later, in the 6th century, the Emperor Justinian built St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of the mountain to establish a sense of authenticity to the site. This is tradition, but what is the truth? Let's break out of a man-made story and ask the question, should tradition supersede the Bible? What does the Bible tell us about the Exodus from Egypt? The children of Israel were living in the best of the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. This area is the fertile Nile Delta in northern Egypt. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. This also describes the fertile Nile Delta. The Nile Delta is shown here at the northern termination of the Nile, full of lush vegetation, in contrast to the surrounding desert. On the night of Passover, the firstborn in each Egyptian home died in the final plague. Then the children of Israel left Egypt that same day. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. On that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. On the day of Passover, the children of Israel crossed the canals of the Nile and became an organized unit at Succoth. They had left the country of Egypt proper, but they were still in territory controlled by the Egyptians. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. The wilderness of the Red Sea is what we call today the Sinai Peninsula, which is surrounded on two sides by the Red Sea. It was through the northern region of the peninsula that they traveled day and night, making their rapid escape from the hands of Pharaoh. During the day they were shaded by the pillar of cloud that would have also provided moisture for them. At night, the pillar of fire would have given them light for their journey. At Etham, they turned south and headed through the mountains in the wilderness of the Red Sea, traveling through a narrow canyon, then stopping at the Red Sea. This expanse of water is called the Gulf of Aqaba today, but in Moses' day it was called the Red Sea. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. Ancient Elath is modern-day Eilat, Israel. Our modern Gulf of Aqaba is the ancient Red Sea, or Yam Suf. This is the beach where the children of Israel were trapped with nowhere to escape. The Egyptian army was fast approaching, and it appeared death was imminent. The children of Israel cried out, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt?" The children of Israel were already out of Egypt when they were preparing to cross the Red Sea. This would exclude any crossing of the Bitter Lakes or the Gulf of Suez. It was at this site that God was preparing to demonstrate to His people a great miracle that would prove His loving care for them. This is the large beach on the Gulf of Aqaba, called Nuweiba, Egypt. This is where it appeared that the forces of darkness were about to be triumphant, but God was in control. Across the gulf is the land of Midian and the holy mountain of God. They were to camp between Migdol and the sea, Migdol meaning a fortified city or tower. At the north end of the beach are the remains of an ancient fort, still partially standing today. It was once a 3-story structure, capable of housing hundreds of Egyptian soldiers who could have prevented any northern escape from the beach. The location is precisely at the narrowest point of land, between the mountains and the sea, in order to control the movement of travelers through the area. The fortress today is receiving a fresh coat of stucco, which is unfortunately covering up the original stone blocks. At the front of the fortress, we were able to see the stonework that formed the entrance into the structure. In the middle of the courtyard, we can see an ancient well that would have supplied the fresh water for the many Egyptian soldiers that were housed here. Outside, we can see how tall the structure had been in its former days, a full 3 stories in height. Another description of the location for the Red Sea crossing was, Camp before Pi-hahiroth, which means mouth of a hole or canyon. As the children of Israel entered the beach, they had made their way through a system of canyons or wadis and encountered this beach at the Red Sea. The Bible tells us, "They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in." They had finally made it through the canyons that snaked their way through the mountains, but now they were trapped on the beach.
We did do that. He was interested in trying to find the site because scientists always kept trying to say that they crossed in the Sea of Reeds, which was ankle deep at a certain time of year and stuff. And Dad wanted to prove that it was a biblical miracle. And so he tried to trace their steps from Egypt. And basically he did. He got an airplane and he had this guy named Moses, actually.
Yep.
This is no lie. We hired a pilot in Eilat and his name was Moses, and he flew us up and down through there, and Dad told him what we're looking for. We're looking for a valley that goes all the way through the mountains from here, from the Sinai Peninsula to here. And the guy said, "Oh yeah, there is one." And back then there wasn't a road even down it, but now they have a road down there.
All the way through, yeah.
It keeps washing out all the time. But anyway, we found that, and it was perfect description of what the Bible said, is they wandered through the valley and got turned. They couldn't get out. The Egyptian army was behind them, and they couldn't turn around to get away, and they couldn't climb up over the mountains to get away. And basically they had to keep going towards the Red Sea, and they were cut off. And so we pretty much knew that that's where it had to be.
Hello friends, just a quick timeout. This video you're watching is part of the Revealing God's Treasure DVD. We cover 5 major discoveries of the late Ron Wyatt: Noah's Ark, Sodom and Gomorrah, Red Sea Crossing, Mount Sinai, and the Ark of the Covenant. It's over 3 hours, the DVD. You can go to arkdiscovery.com and order a copy of the DVD. We have bulk order discounts, cheaper per unit to order that way. But this DVD is great for sharing with others. So I would encourage you to order these and hand out to your friends, folks in your area, your family, to help them see these exciting discoveries that prove the Bible is true. They convey a message of judgment in the past because God's getting ready to judge mankind, judge the living. We're near the end of time, so this DVD is very important. You also get a free 8-page magazine, gloss paper, covering the discoveries. And we also have in our store the book Revealing God's Treasure Illustrated, which shows color photographs of the discoveries. It's on gloss paper, nice to share with others. It's a nice coffee table book in your home. So take a look at that also in our store, arkdiscovery.com. Click on the store there. So, okay, let's get back to the rest of the video right now.
And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. It was here that the pillar of cloud blocked the Egyptians from advancing toward the children of Israel. For there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness, and obstructed their flight. There must have been excitement as they reached the beach at the sea, but that soon turned to gloom as they discovered their plight. They were trapped on the beach, awaiting their death at the hands of Pharaoh. From the middle of the beach, we can see the opening of Pi-hahiroth in the distance, but we head south in order to locate an amazing marker here at the beach. Near the road, we see this large pillar which was found by Ron Wyatt in 1978 during his first visit to this beach. It had fallen down and was lying in the edge of the water, but today it is about 500 feet from the sea and has been set in concrete. This pillar is even mentioned in the Bible, a pillar to the Lord at Itz, Egypt's border. At the south end of the beach is where we can see the pillar. A matching column on the other side of the Gulf in Saudi Arabia was found by Ron Wyatt in 1984 and was shown to Saudi authorities. On the Saudi pillar were Hebrew inscriptions which included the words Pharaoh, Mizraim or Egypt, Moses, death, water, Yahweh, Solomon, and Edom. The inscriptions on this column have been removed since the Egyptians living here were not excited about a Hebrew celebration marker located in their own backyard. Using Google Earth, one can zoom in on the beach here and spot the pillar standing near the road. This is an exciting use of technology to see the Bible come alive. The pillar stands here today as a testimony of truth, marking the location of the Red Sea crossing. From here, we can see the water that presented itself as an obstacle to the children of Israel. A short distance downhill, we come to the edge of the water where a wonderful miracle took place, where the Lord provided protection to His people, even though they were angry and complaining. Are you not the one who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? As we stand here at the beach, we can see something similar to concrete. But it is the sand and gravel here that has been melted by the divine fire, the pillar that stood here at the beach. One can see larger rocks that are enveloped by the melted sand. This entire area is hardened like concrete. A close-up view shows the sand and small rocks all fused together. Depth charts of the Gulf of Aqaba show the Eilat Deep to the north and the Aragonese Deep to the south. Between these two deep areas is a path through the sea. When Ron Wyatt was at this spot in 1978, he decided to inspect the waters here for any evidence that may have been left behind from approximately 20,000 chariots, plus the horses, horsemen, and foot soldiers. What he found has been confirmed by others. At Nuweiba, one can rent a boat and explore these waters for remnants of the Egyptian army. From out on the water, one can look back to the Nuweiba beach. Diving in the water here is extremely easy, since the water is very clear with high visibility. Investigations have revealed artifacts which confirm our previous conclusions about the site. The sea floor is smooth and contains gradual contours. Our first artifact to inspect is this chariot wheel that still has 3 of its 4 spokes, plus the hub is extending upward. We see 90-degree angles here, which are a sign of man-made structure. The Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels.
I did dive on the Nuweiba side several times, probably about 500 dives by now. The first time I dived was in the end of 1996. Ron Wyatt took me there with Leonard Muller, actually. That was the first time I dived and the first time I met Leonard. And they very kindly invited me on that dive. That was December 1996, and the last dive I did was February 2011. So yeah, I believe I've seen chariot pots in the bottom of the Red Sea there. We also dived for Tim Mahoney, for Mahoney Media, to try and get some footage for the Exodus conspiracy. And I dived with Ross Patterson several times, and Andrew Ross, both from Australia, New Zealand. So there's been a lot of diving on the Nuweiba side, on the Egyptian side, and we've taken pictures of chariot wheels, and there's another wheel which we also found on that 96 dive with Ron, and I believe it's a four-spoked wheel, and I think one of the spokes is missing, so you just see the 3 spokes, but you've got perfect right angles there, and then where the wooden rim of the wheel would be has eroded away, but where you've got the hub, that would be made of metal, so that's what remains, and that's in quite shallow water.
The chariot wheel with 6 spokes was the most widely used by the Egyptians. Egyptian chariots were known to use metal hubs in the center of the wheels. Using metal detectors, divers have found metal in the raised hubs that are now covered in coral.
So when you dive with underwater metal detector, you can go over all the corals and you don't get any reading. And then when you go over obviously metal or iron or whatever, you do get a reading. So that's the way you know that if you've got a wheel shape and you get a strong metal reading from it, then that would be the difference between just a round coral and something that could potentially be a chariot wheel. So when you compare this particular 4-spoked hub to the hubs that you see in the Egyptian Museum, it looks exactly the same, and there's metal where you'd expect to see it.
Here we see another 4-spoked chariot wheel with 1 spoke missing and a center raised hub. The coral here has preserved the chariot parts by retaining the man-made structure, even after the wood has disappeared. Here we see another wheel suspended on its axle, standing at attention. It has 6 spokes and a raised center hub. Ron Wyatt made many dives here and located many artifacts. This could have once been a chariot cab.
Then we got, like Dad had an old 8mm camera. The very first time we went scuba diving in there, and we had metal detectors, electronic ones with batteries in them, and Dad just put the camera in a plastic bag and took it under the water to try to take pictures. Didn't work, drowned the camera, ruined everything, ruined the metal detectors. We were total amateurs at everything except for believing. We're good at that, that was it.
Horse remains have also been found here, such as this shrunken hoof. Horses are not in the Sinai Peninsula today. Human remains have also been found, such as this coral-covered femur bone on the right. Lab tests confirmed that it is in fact bone. Other bones have also been found. A cross-section reveals the bone inside the coral.
I remember diving with Dr. Nerida Tichenor. I think that was the 1996 dive actually, and I was her buddy at the time, and she picked up it looked like a bone. She's a medical doctor, so maybe that helps to identify body parts and bones and that sort of thing. So she picked that up, and Leonard Muller took that bone to the Department of Osteology at his university in Sweden, and they did identify it. They did identify it as a male right side femur, I think, and they tried to date it as best they could and gave the dimensions of the man that it would have belonged to and so forth. So there's human remains there.
Here we see a chariot wheel standing on its axle in this old 1978 footage shot by Ron Wyatt. Next, we see an 8-spoke wheel with 1 spoke missing. 8-spoke wheels were only used during the 18th dynasty, the time of the Exodus.
It was around about the same dive, I think 1996, that Eric Lemke from America was diving with a young man called Rory. And they'd been diving quite deep for a while. They were about 28 meters as well. And they found what they described as a bronze wheel. Now, because they'd been diving a while, they were getting low on air when they found the wheel, and 28 meters is too deep to start getting low on air and getting into any emergency situation. But anyway, you know, you're diving for days and days and you finally find a wheel. They said it didn't have much coral on it at all. You could just see it sitting there. So I think Rory tried to grab hold of it and tugged it a bit, because this is kind of cemented in behind the coral. All the coral grows around it. And it wouldn't tug, but as he was tugging, he was of course breathing heavier and using up more and more of his air. And I guess they were so excited they weren't keeping an eye on their air. And so eventually he ran out of air at 28 meters. And, you know, the story goes that he looked at Eric, his buddy, and with panic in his eyes, and he grabbed the regulator, put it in his mouth. So Eric had to grab his spare regulator and breathe off that. And then they ascended to the surface safely. But there's an eyewitness account of a bronze wheel down there. I think they said it was an 8-spoke bronze wheel, but they didn't manage to get photographs.
The premier find here at the crossing site is this gold veneer that was left behind from a 4-spoke chariot wheel. The Bible tells us there were 600 choice chariots used in the chase of the children of Israel. This artifact was left behind at a depth of 200 feet. Since specialized equipment would be necessary to raise it to the surface, today it is still in the location where it was found.
Because when Dad first did the cameras,
Yeah.
I don't think we even had the scuba gear
No,
yet,
we
did we?
didn't.
I think we were just
No, our
snorkeling
first
out the
trip,
first
we didn't
time.
really find anything, except we found the spot where we thought that it was.
But when
the
we
crossing
actually
was.
did go scuba diving, Dad bought 2 little underwater Kodak cameras, and that's what the underwater pictures were taken with. I took a picture of 3 different wheels. The golden chariot wheel picture got drowned in one of the cameras, and the other camera had a bunch of chariot wheels, but not the gold one.
Me and Ronnie went down and touched.
We touched the gold chariot
one.
wheel.
How
Yeah,
deep was that?
Somewhere around 180 feet,
yeah, it was
right around there.
like Ronnie said earlier. We were swimming about 30, 35 feet where you can stay all day, whatever, 32 feet. So
But
we
then
were up
we
there
would go
swimming
down.
around, and if we saw anything, we'd go down.
Since there are chariot parts on this side of the Red Sea crossing, could there be other chariot parts on the other side of the Gulf, showing a continuation of artifacts? On the shore opposite of Nuweiba, inspection of the seafloor in Saudi Arabia has also been conducted to see if chariot parts can be found on this side of the Red Sea crossing. While investigating the Saudi Arabian waters, Viveka Pontian found this beautiful round chariot wheel specimen with a raised center hub. This is confirmation of the chariot parts continuing to the other side of the crossing site, opposite Nuweiba. By confirming the location of the Red Sea crossing, one is then able to conclude without a doubt that the real Mount Sinai must be over in Saudi Arabia, in Midian, just as the Bible says.